Got money on that clock. See how he tests it.
Oh, it's nice. Did it have to be reset again?
How 40 stacks so far so good?
Oh, they were calling back, not forwards.
Yeah.
Totally the wrong direction. Accelerated clock.
Going back. Good for you.
I am calling this Committee of the Whole meeting for the Town of Gibsons to order at 1 p.m. We are honored to be gathered on the traditional territory of the Skokomish Nation. I have a text here from Councillor Lumley sending his regrets because he's stuck in Horseshoe Bay with the ferry cancellations this morning. But he does think he'll probably make it to the regular meeting today. So I've called the meeting to order. We need to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. All those in favor? The motion carries. And first up, we have a delegation. Welcome, come on up, Telfer Maynard from Hey Ya Carts, and the presentation was on neighborhood zero emissions vehicles. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Madam Council, thank you for your time. My name is Telfer Maynard. I'm COO and co-founder of Hey Ya Carts, based in Vancouver. We operate Canada's largest fleet of low-speed vehicles. That's what they look like. Our vehicles are used primarily as self-drive rentals for tourists, but also for parades, marathons, sporting events, airport logistics, private events, municipal shuttle services, and we also have a pending application with the passenger transport license to offer guided tours using NZEVs. Today I'd like to outline what NZEVs are, how they're regulated, and what policy options exist for extended operations of NZEVs in Gibsons. While Hey Ya Carts brands them as street legal golf carts, they're not actually golf carts at all. In fact, an NZEV is an entire class of motor vehicle, not any particular model. Federally, they are defined as low-speed vehicles under Canada's Motor Vehicle Safety Act. In BC, they are defined as neighborhood zero emissions vehicles under the Motor Vehicle Act. In other places, they are called neighborhood electric vehicles, or NEVs. Whether an NEV, an LSV, or an NZEV, in Canada, they're all the same thing. To operate on public roads in BC, they were required to be plated and insured through ICBC, just like any other car or truck, and the driver needs a valid license. I've included a handout with details on both federal and provincial regulations. In many ways, these are simply small cars. The primary differences are in their safety features and their limited speed. To operate in Canada, they must bear the Transport Canada National Safety Mark and be issued a VIN, certifying that they meet all safety requirements. Among other things, they must have seat belts, laminated glass windshields, wipers, lights, turn signals, and mirrors. They must also be speed limited to a maximum of 40 kilometers per hour. I've included the Transport Canada Technical Standards document in your handout as well. Under provincial rules, NZEVs may operate anywhere in BC on roads posted 40 kilometers or lower, on roads posted up to 50 kilometers an hour within municipalities that pass a bylaw permitting them, and in NZEV permit zones designated by the Ministry of Transportation outside municipal boundaries. And they're allowed to cross highways that have a speed limit of up to 80 kilometers an hour. In short, without a municipal bylaw, they are limited to 40 kilometer an hour roads. Within these rules, they can go anywhere a car can go. However, they are generally not allowed in bike lanes unless the bike lane is so designated. But in most places, they are permitted to use bus lanes where available, as long as that lane is on the right side of the road. More than 30 municipalities in British Columbia currently permit NZEVs on roads posted up to 50 kilometers an hour. This includes several major cities, as well as many smaller and tourism-based communities. In addition, the City of Victoria, the City of Burnaby, and the District of Tofino all operate NZEVs within their municipal fleets, and Pure Litter uses them for last mile delivery across Canada. Also, the City of Victoria rents vehicles from us for parking lot shuttle operations, and the North Vancouver Business Association operates one as a free public shuttle within their commercial business district. Gibsons does not need to create a new framework. It would simply be joining an established provincial model. For reference, I've attached a copy of Vancouver's NZEV bylaws in your handouts. Gibsons is a compact, tourism-driven community. Travel distances between the waterfront, transportation hubs, residential areas, and the commercial core are short. Council has expressed interest in lowering municipal speed limits, which makes it easier and safer to bring low-speed vehicles into the mix. NZEVs are quiet, eco-friendly, work well on narrow roads, and don't take up much space to park. In fact, they're usually so small that you can fit 2 in one parking spot. They are designed specifically for short-distance urban travel, have very little impact in terms of space, noise, or the environment, and simply represent right-sized local transportation. Gibsons is well suited for them. Another important consideration is accessibility. Not every short trip is walkable for every person, and not everyone can ride a bike. These vehicles are not mobility scooters and are not classified as accessibility devices. However, they provide an additional transportation option for people who cannot walk long distances or ride bicycles. And they're easier to get in and out of and cheaper to buy than a car. They expand transportation choices without replacing existing infrastructure or transit. To achieve an NZEV-friendly municipality, there are 2 approaches available. Option 1, adopt a 40 km/h municipality-wide speed limit. If Gibsons does this, NZEVs would automatically be permitted under provincial rules, and no NZEV bylaw would be required. This is what the City of Nelson has done. Option 2, maintain 50 km/h roads and adopt a bylaw permitting NZEVs on roads posted 50 km/h or lower. This is what most other municipalities have done. While both options involve simple bylaw amendments, Option 1 also involves replacing existing speed limit signage. I have included a letter in your handouts from the BC Minister of Transportation on the best way to accomplish such a change if that's the direction you choose to go. For roads outside municipal jurisdiction, such as Marine Drive, the ministry may either reduce speed limits to 40 km/h, as was done on Bowen Island, or establish an NZEV permit zone, as was done in Nanoose Bay. Those precedents are included in your handouts. If council is supportive, once they are fully legal in Gibsons, we would welcome assistance in engaging the ministry regarding these options. So today I'm asking council to consider directing staff to either draft an NZEV bylaw for 50 km/h roads or to adopt a 40 km/h municipality-wide speed limit. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from council? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I had a whole list of questions and you answered all of them, so thank you. The one outstanding was what's the largest capacity of passengers in consideration of, say, like you said, tourism, shuttles, that type of thing? How big can these things
The
go?
largest NZEVs that I know of can hold 8 people. Most of them only carry 2.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White, and thank you for the presentation. In the option of going to the 40 kilometer speed limit throughout the municipality, who covers the cost of sign replacement?
I assume that would be the city that does that.
Yeah, I should clarify, if we were to consider that, and probably we'd be looking at it in our master transportation plan, it would be for a lot more reasons than just allowing. I think we need to be very clear to the public about that if we were going to reduce the speed limit, it's not just for this, because there'd be a lot of other reasons to do it.
Just in follow-up to that, we'd been talking about a 30 kilometer speed limit throughout the community, so, step in the right direction.
Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, are these carts purchased by individuals, or there's also a system of renting, and even, what's the other system that, co-ops? Yeah, thank you.
So my company rents them out to tourists or locals or anyone that wants to drive them around. We do mostly hourly rentals, but we do long-term rentals as well. But the idea is that people do buy them for themselves. There are people in this room that I've been speaking with behind me that want to buy them for their own personal use.
Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor White. The geography of this town is not totally friendly. You mentioned a vehicle that could take 8. Most of the pictures look like 4 or 6. How are they on, with the grades we're dealing with in both directions? A, getting up them, and B, the braking coming down.
Yeah. So ours are the only ones I'm familiar with. They have a lot of torque. If they weren't speed governed, they could probably go 80 kilometers an hour. They're not short of power, but they're governed to 40. And they have no problem going. We've taken fully loaded vehicles up quite steep hills without a problem. They will go slower, maybe down to 20 kilometers an hour, going up a really steep hill. Coming down is no problem. They use regenerative braking like an electric car, and they also have brakes, so there's no problem on hills. As for the other manufacturers, I'm not aware of their specs, but with lithium batteries now, they do have a lot of power.
Thank you, Mayor White. You mentioned they are governed. We've noticed with some of the electric bikes and even scooters, individuals who purchase them are eliminating the governing system. How easy is that to do on these vehicles? Because, most people like speed.
Yeah, I don't know anything about how they govern the other manufacturers. Probably the biggest manufacturer in the world is GEM in California. And I don't know anything about those vehicles at all, but the ones that we use they have a proprietary software and a plug, and we have to plug it into your laptop with an adapter, and we can program it from there.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned that they can get to 80 kilometers, so the control to 40, is it something in the software or?
Yeah, it's all software controlled, and honestly, I don't know how to make it. I've tried to remove the speed limit for testing, and I've only managed to get it to go 45. Like, it won't let me set it above 45. So I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I don't know what it is. So.
Is it the typical charging system that you would have on an electric vehicle?
Our vehicles plug into a regular outlet. They don't use, they have tiny batteries. They're 8 kilowatt batteries, and a typical Tesla has like an 80, so they're 10 times smaller. They just use a regular outlet, just plug in.
And that lasts how long typically?
Ours have a range between 50 and 80 kilometers, but it would depend on the battery. Whatever battery the manufacturer put in would, I guess, make a difference to that.
Thank you, Mayor White. The ones you lease, where are they manufactured?
They're manufactured in Armstrong.
Okay.
And there was a comment regarding parking that was really interesting to me, because anything that can help with parking is a fabulous thing. Is it a 2-in-1 average, you said, about, for like an average size would typically
So
take a
they're all
half?
smaller vehicles. Ours are just under 4 feet wide. So we store most of our main fleet is at Bentall Center, downtown Vancouver. And we put 2-door parking spot there. We have, when we had to consolidate them for storage, we can fit 5 into 2 parking spots. So, but they kind of Tetris them in.
I like everything about this, so my question is, what are the what are the challenges that you've experienced? Because you've obviously had the experience in a number of communities now.
Yeah, when we first opened in Vancouver, they were already approved in Vancouver before we came along. They were approved back in, so the BC government, the federal government brought in the regulations for them in 2007, and the BC government approved them in 2008. And at that time, a lot of municipalities jumped on board with it, even though these vehicles didn't really exist yet. Nobody had them. There was only one manufacturer that I know of that was GEM. It didn't really catch on. I think the batteries were too small. The technology wasn't there yet, because they do have to be electric by law. And so, yeah, it took us just to get our license in Vancouver took 9 months, our business license, because they didn't understand what we were trying to do. And then when we launched in Victoria, we had our business license less than 2 weeks after applying, because apparently they called the city of Vancouver and said, "Did you have any problems?" And Vancouver said no. So it was really easy there.
Thank you, and I'll just end with a question for staff, which is that obviously looking at speed limits has implications with our master transportation plan, because we actually have a master transportation plan scheduled for this coming year. I don't know if it's where we are with that. This is a good, I mean, we can ask about that in the budget, because it's on our budget agenda item too, but I'll ask now what the scheduling's looking like for that. And yeah, we're definitely going to be looking at speed limits in that context. So kind of a broader context, but I'll also ask if consideration of these neighborhood zero emission vehicles might be part of that plan.
Thank you. So to the mayor, the timeline for that, it's currently out in the market right now for proposals. So we're a ways out. I would anticipate with public engagement for a plan of that nature, likely we would be kind of bringing it back to around this time next year, maybe, once the plan would actually be finalized. So in terms of timeline for assessing a town-wide adjustment to the speed limit, it likely it's something that we wouldn't want to do. I wouldn't recommend is done until that plan is finished, just so we don't end up changing it and then changing it again. I think that would be harder on the public. So yeah, it would be in scope to consider the speed limit change. We could certainly have them comment on changing modalities. That's been part of that was included in the RFP, so that would cover this type of vehicle as well. From my perspective, I think drafting a bylaw would likely be a more expedient way, if that's something that the committee's considering.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm just a bit confused about drafting the bylaw, because I mean, wouldn't that still be something we'd want to consider in a master transportation plan if this is happening in the next year?
Sorry, to the mayor. So yes, if the question is the type of vehicle that we want to allow, then that would make sense for that to be a part of the transportation plan. If council is interested in moving that forward regardless of the plan, my understanding is that a bylaw could be in place to allow them on speed limit or streets that have a speed limit upwards of 50 kilometers an hour. So we wouldn't need to change the speed limit. It would just be a bylaw to allow the vehicles on those streets, which could be done. I don't see a need why that would have to wait for the master strategic plan, the transportation strategic plan to complete, unless that's the direction that we receive. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll take that under advisement then. And yeah, we don't, as a policy, we don't pass motions directly to the same day as delegations, but it gives council a chance to
Absolutely.
consider the presentation and look at it in broader context. So thank you for coming and making a presentation.
Thank you very much.
And now for the single report on our agenda, but it's a big one. which is our general municipal projects list, operating and capital, coming from the Director of Finance in support of our budget process this year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So turning to the report, there are operating and capital project lists for the committee's consideration. And the key thing is confirming the 2026 projects presented to you and scoping out the 5-year project plan that will go into the financial plan 2026 to 2030. So beginning, I thought Mr. Mayor, we would go through the operating projects and then stop for questions, and then go through the capital projects and stop for questions, and then go to the wrap-up on this.
Okay.
So on the operating projects, the key list for the moment is page 15 of 22. And there's a full range of items there. Starting with the BC municipal election, October 17th, 2026, and a provision allowance is made for the cost of the election and also for the new council's orientation. The second item up in the operating list and also in orange comes out of the Dialogue 26 with the Gibsons community. And this is a Town of Gibsons technology adoption outlook and supportive adoptions actually in progress in 2026. So whether or not $50,000 will be spent is open, it depends. But the purpose of this is to go through by department and consider AI, robotics, new materials and processes that are coming in the pipeline, checking whether there's something we should be working on right now in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and making sure that the whole team is in on the initial work that's going on our AI chat bot, which may become chat bots, and also that people are seriously looking at the data sets that we already own in-house and the specialized data sets that are accessible to local governments elsewhere, say on water or sewer, and how we're accessing those, and in what ways would AI be helpful in looking at that data for us. The comment at Dialogue 26 or comments were the people who were present wanted to see or some assurance that the town would be adopting technology as fast as it became available. And it was a bit more than that. It was really felt like an expectation. And that's great. It's good to have the community's encouragement. On some items, you don't want to be out on the bleeding edge because we're quite small, so you would rather watch others go first. But then there are some areas where we have strengths like natural assets, and where we see things coming along, we would want to get onto them as quickly as possible because we have the internal capacity to cope with new things. Next up, in the development services area, so that's planning and infrastructure for purposes of this review, affordable housing. There is a small budget. It's item number 6 on this list. And the purpose of this budget is to be going out and looking for opportunities to free up sites for housing, particularly multiple unit residential housing, most likely affordable or housing that is on the lower end of the market range, because that's where we have some gaps here. So that's just a little bit of money to see that, and we'll see later that the town also has a large amount of money to go several steps beyond that, and that's on the capital side. One area that's worth delving into right now, I mean, there's several items that cross operating and capital. This is one. So Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, through their Housing Accelerator Fund, made about $2.3 million available to the town as a commitment, subject to the town meeting new housing unit results. So we're on track and doing well so far. It's a process from 24 through 2028. Now, out of that money, while it has paid for a lot of the core planning activities in recent times, 2024, 25, and actually on into 26, Council did want to see a substantial portion of that held back and reserved for purposes of capital investments. So the estimate right now is about $1.5 million. And there's two ways in terms of housing sites that the town can concentrate. One is sites it owns itself that would be suitable. And the town does not have a lot of those because it's already advanced projects where other people have built on those sites. But it still has at least one, and it, as is often the case, they're not yet serviced. There's a lot of work to be done there. This money, part of that money could be used for that purpose. Another way of going at it is, rather than trying to buy land, which requires millions, and maybe you can do one and that's it, is focusing the effort on acquiring the rights to develop other sites. And it happens in a variety of ways for local governments. Sometimes there's a private gift. Sometimes it's possible with other nonprofit organizations, such as religious organizations. It's possible to negotiate a long-term lease for a specific purpose, and then the local government gets it into the hands of a nonprofit that's going to do the development. I haven't heard of any other arrangements, but I'm sure there are, because in real estate development, there are always unique ways to do things. Sometimes there are land swaps. But the key here on this one is it's already council and the town's preference to see nonprofit organizations develop these projects rather than the town itself. And those organizations are very well positioned if they have a good project to receive senior government financing to enable them to do it. There is one amenity that has been suggested as a use of some half money, and that is the up and down trail, and to upgrade it from top to bottom so that there would be, it's the only unique right-of-way that the town essentially has the land that can take people between Lower and Upper Gibsons. It's a pedestrian type project. And this is one way of making money available to finally get it done. So just flagging that here. So flipping back out of this operating capital mix and continuing on with development services, and I'm following the order of the report too. There was a Gibsons parking strategy last year, and it was set aside for follow-up over time. There are two distinct follow-on parking projects that were not necessarily identified in that strategy, but have been identified for action. And they've been listed for 26. And on the operating side, this is about providing, well, I guess I should touch on them. So there is a large number of investments being made in the Lower Gibsons Five Corners area, 26, 27. The town has existing lots down there. The town has spoken with others who have parking lots in the area. And all of these lots would benefit from some upgrading, which does not necessarily have to be that expensive on a capital basis, but how best to do that, we don't have all the expertise. So one project is to find the good consultant or consultants to help us essentially make the work lists of what's appropriate in each of the parking lot that's there and discuss it either with council or the lot owners so that we can move on and actually do that work. And there is some money available out of reserve that would fund that work. Not a large amount of money, but enough if the strategy to do things is kept simple. Arising at Dialogue 26 was a suggestion that there are a number of places in Gibson still with open ditches next to roads, and it could be possible with a culvert put in place to essentially pave over those ditches and create parking spaces, which would actually still be considered on-street parking, but I mean, the benefit is just getting those parking spaces. And I understand a number of those that would be potential spots to do this are down in the Lower Gibsons area, and that would be helpful. The more spaces that can be created or made more readily available in Lower Gibsons, the better. So there are two projects there. There are number 19 and 20. And those, again, are estimates. There's no need to necessarily spend $40,000 in each of those. It's more about what is necessary to get this arranged. Likely, number 20 would be less expensive. And then moving on in the report to still in development services, though, is the whole area of OCP follow-up. So there are several projects in this list for 26. The first one is the subdivision servicing bylaw, and that is item number 5 on the list. The transportation master plan, which has already come up today, that's item number 18. Master parks and recreation plan. This is item number 16. And of note on the master parks and planning, yes, in these plans, there's a great deal of conversation and discussion with the public, the community at large, and recommendations and so on, as you'd expect in such a plan. But a key item from a business perspective is to end up with a prioritized listing with this master parks plan of the significant parks and recreation amenity gaps. There are a number of these plans that end in a very general way with huge long lists of items that are just characterized by their type, and it's not clear which one to act on. It's not clear who to partner with. So this is the kind of list that is needed. And in order to pursue items with the Sunshine Coast Regional District, to pursue items with Gibson's community partners, and to pursue items with developers, in particular through a proposal for an amenities cost charge bylaw for that purpose. So if you have a prioritized list that deals with the significant matters, the gaps, that's usually the same schedule that you would see in an ACC bylaw, the same way with the development cost charge bylaw, you've got a list of the priority projects by their nature, water, sewers, and so on. You would have the same thing available for this purpose here. And even if it did not end up being part of an ACC bylaw, you would still have a good prioritized list to work with. And though I've never seen it, it would be wonderful if some of these items could have cost estimates as to like how much that great idea will seriously cost. Is that $100,000 or is that $7 million? Sorry, so that was number A5 on the report. And through this discussion, we are covering pretty much everything listed. Turning to infrastructure and asset management in particular, items included on the list are the replacement of the core asset management system that the town has.
Sorry, did you propose earlier that we would take a break for questions at this point?
Once we finish, but we're not quite there.
Okay.
We have a ways to go on the operating. But
okay.
We're more than halfway through.
Okay.
We'll wait then. I don't see anybody, Nancy, to ask questions anyway.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, infrastructure asset management. So there, above item number 7 on page 15 of 22, there's an asset management header. Item number 8 is the replacement of core software. At the very bottom, under transportation services, is roads condition assessment. Also in that section is, back up under asset management. Item number 7 is building condition assessment. So the roads and buildings condition assessment work are gaps. There's some key information that we don't have. Like we don't know what the total value of roads are. We don't know what the backlog in roads and buildings is. And we don't know how much should be raised through taxation for reserves to pay for roads and buildings over time. So these condition assessments will provide at least pretty good initial answers to that. The core asset management system, that's just the whole complexity of all the GIS mapping and all the asset registers and all kinds of data that is tied to those mapping references in a system and how you can use them and work with them. Now, if we could go to the 5-year view, which is page 17 of 22. Thank you. A couple of things to call out on this sheet. So we've been through all of these projects pretty much, so we don't need to go through the long list on the left, page 17 to 22. But there are some key takeaways. All those colored green items there, that means activities funded with grants. And the remaining light orange colored figures are things that are being town reserve funded. So funds set aside from past taxation. And that pretty much covers it. There are some yellows there, which in a moment we'll just touch on a financial plan implication of that. There's a number of items that just have no funding accumulated for them, and yet they're quite big bills when they roll along and hit you every 5 to 10 years. A couple of other things on this sheet. I mean, it totals down at the bottom of current budget 2026, $1.4 million on projects. 890,000 of that approximately is in the development services area, of which 350,000 is infrastructure and 460,000 is connected with resilience work. So while last year was a big year spending on planning, this year is picking up those items and implementing them, and that's where most of the money for operating projects is going this year. On the very bottom of the sheet, when you look at the totals, there's this great big total for 26, 1.4 million, and then suddenly it's 250,000, 50,000, 50,000, 110,000. There's not a lot there. Part of that is senior governments fund areas of core interest to them, and local governments choose to pick up on those programs as they become available based on their own interest in those priorities. And we're not so clear right now what will be the priorities in 28, 29, 30. The senior governments haven't rolled any money out further down the road beyond things connected with housing. And the other thing that I just noted is we have a bit of an issue setting money aside every year in reserves for things that it's not clear government will pay for. So dropping this page and heading to page 12 of 22, which is financial implications of all this. Trapped in my own pages. Well, I'll just have to do it from the top of my head. So if we were to look at, if we were to look back at page 15 of 22, what I wanted to highlight for council or the committee at the bottom of that sheet, that's page 15 of 22, is that grants are paying for 89% of operating projects, which that's normal. That's really solid performance. You want to see roughly 90% being paid by senior government. And the other 10% coming out of town reserves, which is what you'd normally expect for those items that senior government isn't interested in assisting with. So the town is in good shape this way. The issue it has is the planning cycle is about 10 years. And the highlight in there is the OCP and the zoning bylaw. And then you get all of these studies on the way into it to get set up and update things in it. And then you get the follow-up plans that are best done right afterwards so that they're all basically of the same date and the same thinking. So over 10 years right now, the cost of doing an abbreviated list of those is now $700,000, and that's the $700,000 the town would pay to external consultants, plus all the staff time and council time. If you divide that by 10, it's about $70,000 a year. So while it's not a recommendation necessarily to action right away, it's suggested in the report that starting in 2028, after the transportation and parks plans are definitely finished in 27, that might be the time to raise $70,000 a year and from then onwards fund an operating reserve account that's dedicated to planning. And just stepping back from this, it's been a very unusual time in the funding of all of these recent planning items. I myself haven't seen that before. It was an outcome of senior government's efforts to accelerate housing supply as fast as possible, to have local governments update all the things that it does in connection with new housing as quickly as possible. And they made a lot of money available, and it's paid for all of this planning cycle. Generally speaking, local governments in the past before that have been able to find one or two helpful, significant contributions from senior government, but otherwise have been on their own to do it, which is why so many smaller governments have had so many gaps in their planning or really dated documents as they wait for the next opportunity to update them. So I won't labor that any further. I mean, the town is, at least in terms of how it's financing its operating projects, it's in a good place. And it's just worth noting that senior government seems to be focused on retrenching other than housing for a while. So there's a good chance that the next major planning round, the town might find that it needs to basically look after itself. And Mr. Mayor, that's all I wanted to flag for to the committee on the operating projects.
Okay, there's a lot there, so I took some notes, but are there other councillors who have questions? Councillor DeAndrade?
Thank you, Mayor. This regard the new on-street parking spaces that the resident would pay. But my question is, would these spaces be private or anyone can park? Because they are considered street parking, but I'm a little bit confused. Can the resident put a sign there, my parking, or something like that?
Councillor DeAndrade, you're absolutely right. This is the trickiest aspect of this. The lead discussion on the community side was they assumed they would be paying for it, but that's not as straightforward as they were making doing this sound. So now I will turn this over to my colleague because you can go at it a couple of different ways.
Thanks, and through the mayor, certainly I think that question is one that we still need to address, and we're a ways away from getting to the point of having a defined approach to this. I think there's a couple of different options that could play out. One could be a resident's like, hey, I want more parking in front of my street, I'm willing to pay for it. We say, really what we wanted, the end goal that we want to get to is a standard of how that would be done to make sure that there's consistency and there's no operating issues with them. And that we have a clear policy direction on how we're going to allow it to happen. And an option could be resident pays. Theoretically, we could get into an encroachment agreement or something like that, or they could have a license to occupy and then it could be private parking. That might not be the recommendation from staff, but that could be an option. It could also be that the resident funds it with an understanding that there's no guarantee that they are entitled to those parking spots because it is on town land and it's just public parking. We've discussed there could be options of doing it on a block by block basis, so we don't end up with just a bunch of chopped up ditches with culverts. So we could say we're willing to do it on this block. There's ways of pursuing local funding areas, or there's a lot of different options in front of us. So we just need to grapple the best way to do it, because I think we recognize that in neighborhoods where there are open ditches on both sides, it is quite limiting, especially with the new densities that are available. We need to find some way of addressing it. And that's a question that will continue to come up, and I think we'll have to come to future council in the future with some options and look for some direction at that point.
I have a question on that too, and I mean, I haven't heard about, if we're going to look at a policy, what about alignment to natural assets? That's got to be key in this too, I would hope. It's fine as a good idea, but I think, if we're going to walk the talk on natural assets, I'd want to make sure that we're considering that before we pave over all the stormwater ditches in town. Let's acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly we would assume if this is a direction that the program is going to go in, we'd be looking at open bottom culverts to make sure that there's infiltration opportunities and all of the considerations, potential impact that there could be on the benefits that open ditching provides. We would certainly have to take that into consideration. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions on this, Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor. Mine's a bit more of a broader overview. I really appreciated seeing the percent breakdown as far as senior government funding and where we sit with funds and then cost to taxpayer. So when we're looking at this in a general overview, and we've got the operational, we're looking at 89% senior government funding. That was, we basically hit that target 90% because we are looking at all the traffic plans, all the necessary planning that we need to do, which then lends us to our operating funding. And the government grant funding has now reduced down to 66% based on being able to meet those areas that we now see need attention. So I guess it's a broad question, and it's maybe not fair to ask, but I'm just trying to get my head around our intention of where we might sit at UBCM. We're looking for, more senior government participation in those expenses that we're anticipating. Am I correct in sort of where we're sitting between anticipated and then looking forward to 2030 in that difference between not hitting the 90% and the capital projects lists goals?
I hope it looks like
Through
Director Wallace is prepared to answer that, yeah.
Through Mayor White, we need to make a careful distinction between the operating and capital funding mix. So for operating, that senior government is essentially funding 90% of all of that project work is excellent, provided the council of the day agrees with those priorities that they're funding. So I've seen figures 80s and up in that area, and usually that's the side that the senior governments are most helpful, and often all levels of the government are in agreement with the priorities at that time. Now on the capital side though, the general understanding is that all levels of government should share. And the long-standing assumption had been that that would be 1/3 each would be considered more or less fair, as provided it was consistent across all kinds of projects. In recent times, and that's still the case, and for example, when we see the 2026 capital list, we'll see that senior government are funding about 66%, 67% of the funds going into all those capital projects. However, the change recently has been for less coordination between the province and the federal government, and I don't know whether that's permanent, but that's how it is now. And also, both parties have moved to we'll fund 100% of your capital project, or we'll fund 50% of your capital project model. So at least for now, at the town of Gibsons, that's still somehow averaging out to the 66, 67%.
Got it.
I would say advocation to groups like UBCM and FCM and so on would be about their reminding the senior governments that no matter how they want to go about providing capital funding to local government infrastructure, they need to keep up their share. Or if a province, for some good reason, can't keep up their share, Canada needs to step up a bit more at that time. That's happened, although more on the East Coast. But yeah, the burden of coming up with a third is definitely as much as a smaller local government like town of Gibsons can handle.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Yeah.
Okay. Our order here. I think, Councillor Coley, have you asked a question on this yet? I don't think so, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor White, and thank you for this report. It's to be appreciated, the information you've provided and the clarity with which you've presented it and the ease of which it is to, grasp. Just going back to a comment that Mayor White made with respect to our natural assets and the parking thing. All these ditches, quote, are on town, I think in most cases are on town property. One of my concerns in covering them over is we're potentially adding to a maintenance cost. So I'm assuming as this process is moved forward, we'll get a cost at what the projected maintenance of these now covered open ditches would become. Because that potentially with, human nature, people dump grass clippings into the ditch, and then they, of course, plug in the area that's covered, and we've got our suction truck there trying to deal with it. So, potentially, to what extent this is extended, it could become quite a maintenance cost, which flies in the face of our, what we've achieved so far with natural asset management. So I'm just echoing my concern that Mayor White raised.
Yeah, that's an additional important point our infrastructure team needs to consider too. I had one too, and I'll go back to Councillor Andrade. About the whole 50,000 for just looking into technology options. I'm just interested more in how that would look. I don't know if there's any manager here who, because in one thing, I guess in some respect, it feels like something we should always be doing, and just with the rapid change that we're seeing, I don't know if that's going to necessarily, if that's like a 2025 thing or a 2026 thing. It may, everything may be turned on its head again, and by further AI or something else 2 years from now. So I just want to make sure if we're going to be putting $50,000 into this, what it looks like, how that's different than just continuously being on top of technology. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a surprise that it's just the nature of AI too. It's kind of like, well, do we need $50,000 when, like, shouldn't some costs actually be less now because of AI? I would hope, and I certainly, we look at consultants' reports. This was brought up at the dialogues. I've seen some recent consultant reports, I'll just say in local government, that look like they were largely done by AI, and we're paying a lot for them. So it just kind of, this also touches on the question of starting to put away in our, funds by 2028 to pay for more expensive reports. But I guess that's part of what we'd be looking at here, but I wouldn't want to produce another, pay $50,000 for something that a consultant's gonna just plug into AI and give back to us. When, for ironically about AI, well, I've got to bring it up.
Yes, by way of explanation, Mayor White, this is intended to be a very hands-on item. So you're absolutely right that shouldn't the organization, shouldn't its senior management team have a vision and a vision of not just being aware of what technology is out there, but like how it should or should not be adopted at this local government. The only way council and the CAO can satisfy themselves that that's true is that there's a document. It's written up. It isn't a discussion piece randomly with departments. And it's a lot more than, so much is happening and coming to fruition at this point so quickly that it's a lot more than AI. It's also being honest and open in the staff group about, yes, what will happen with robotics? How will that look in local government? How will that look at town of Gibsons? Will it just be an automated electric vehicle that scurries around collecting water meter data and road condition assessment data and is programmed to drive through school zones in the morning at 30K to keep the traffic down? I mean, that might be the limit of robotics here, but it needs to be addressed by department what it is. We are doing our best to organize the utilities to have huge reserve funding. Maybe we don't have to dig up so many roads and replace so many pipes, as long as we're thinking about nanotechnology and miniature robots going in there and spraying pipes with new materials and identifying for us, you only need to dig up this piece and do this valve, do this joint, and that's it. So the point of starting with management is, management, you actually know a lot. You've gone to all of these annual conferences. You're hearing about this. Can we please just get that document in a time range and when you think that would be appropriate for Gibsons? Now, the use of, so far we haven't used any consultants. That's just us. The use of the consultants is, rather than to ask them to write the report and all that stuff, is to say, hey, here's the section to do with sewer. You are a sewer specialist and we know, because everyone knows, you're like one of the gurus on the sewer technology. Could you read what we got here, edit it for us, make some suggestions about things we're missing? Where we're being optimistic, can you tell us that that's never going to happen at a small local government? And selectively use the consultants to help us finish what is internal management working document, but that council or the community that wished could see. That's the intent of this project. And it was triggered by just the simple questions on AI. What's the town doing with it? What's it going to do with it? Will it trigger savings? What kind of savings will it trigger? I mean, there's a lot of basic stuff here we really don't have an answer for yet, but we could very quickly. I hope that helps.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to add a little bit more to what William was talking about. Our first IT plan was over 10 years ago. The focus at the time was on business continuity and security of the system and so on. Business improvement didn't have necessarily. Then up until 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of our efforts were on securing accessing the information, making sure we had our information in at least 3 different places. And more of late, this focus on user-friendly, making our information available on cells and pads and so on, and that doesn't happen so much by accident. The last couple of years, the arrival of options for AI, it's there's possibilities on all of our business units, but we have to. I think the point to some of this stuff is that we have to be a bit more intentional into it, and not just sort of live as a sort of a consequence. And so we're big users of it, and this is just an opportunity to sort of. This could have been sort of an improvement to our infrastructure, to our IT plan or the strategy, but it has a particular focus on AI because right now it's where the opportunities are. And it is still about business continuity and security, but also putting more controls over people's interactions with us, whether they can choose to subscribe to something or not subscribe to something, or what even the type of information they want to get and so on. But yeah, so this is kind of how it's been evolving over time.
I see some counselors on this topic in particular, yeah.
Oh, no, not.
Okay, let's just, Counselor Kroll, I think, wants to talk.
Thank you, Mayor White. This whole AI thing is a bit daunting, and I appreciate it being flagged, but we're probably one of every other municipality in the province that's looking at how is AI going to serve us in the best possible way. To my mind, this is something that perhaps, I'm not saying that we should all, that UBCM, like a resolution should almost go to UBCM on how collectively we can work rather than everyone going out on a limb and spending vast sums of money to figure out to do that. It's done more centrally as a joint. The director looks like he's got an answer to this already. So maybe I'll just stop there. But it just seems that rather than every municipality, running off trying to, solve the riddle, that we should be working as a collective group through UBCM.
You can literally type in what are municipalities of BC doing with AI right now, and you could say, give me 100 pages, and it'll give you 100 pages. And it'll be fascinating reading too, I'm sure of it. And some there might be some errors in it, but it's also, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm divided about it too. And I also feel like I'm concerned about this. It also, if we were to invest in this as a kind of a report, how do we prevent that report from being out of date? Like as soon as it's printed out. Director Waltz.
I still think it's a misunderstanding. We are not investing in a report. That's not what this project is about. It's about a working plan that management will update as it goes. And it's about accessing specialists to make sure that we're not missing some key items. The other side of it is, management have been going to conferences. I've been going to conferences and hearing updates for 5 years now on stuff, and it's starting to get to the point now where there's some low-hanging fruit for us small local governments. And that's why we have a prototype chatbot. That's why we have some staff reaching out and working with contractors who seem to be early adopters, and we're picking up spots where, wow, we could have paid for road condition assessment at $50,000 or more. Now, because some contractor is willing to adopt it or has adopted the technology and refined it enough that they can sell it as a service, they're going to come and do that work for $25,000 or less. So we're already on to the low-hanging fruit. In a sense, there is a self-policing aspect to this, getting this working plan going, because we found in talking with one another that some of us don't really want to talk about some of these things, but it's helpful to get on and do it. We have members of our labor force who'd like to know how what the picture is for adopting some of these things. I mean, they see the robots in China and Japan and South Korea and wonder when we'll be seeing more of that here. And I don't think they have to worry, but anyway, I hope that helps. Oh, I did miss explaining one item to do with it. So it's $50,000, but a chunk of that is a provision to help people adopt the low-hanging fruit. So it isn't just spend it all to get a working document and that's it. We might need some help on refining our first chatbot. So far, so good. However, not so good that we've felt safe to set it out in public use. So there are some things there where we might need a little help. When you talk about fancy data sets and how you're going to extract them and use an AI tool that you can subscribe to be like your engine and brains for working with that data set, we have to sort out, wow, does that mean like $10, $200 a year subscriptions to start this? Doesn't sound like a lot, but hey, that's $2,000. And if it works, okay, that's $2,000 every year. So that $50,000 is also intended to, if you have something good and practical to work on and you can persuade, say, the CAO that we should go with that, that's where the money will come from. So I hope this is coming across as a very hands-on exercise and looking for practical uses to leverage our time and resources. Thank you.
Got Councillor DeAndrade next.
Thank you. We can make Gibsons no robots soon. Hey, everybody wants to come here because you don't have to see them. I was just puzzled with the cost of the subdivision servicing bylaw. It might be because I don't fully understand, but we do have a bylaw. So update, I'm just trying to understand why and I understand also that we do hire lawyers at the end to ensure that the bylaw doesn't have any issue, but I was just like, what is, I don't see it like a big change, but it might be because I'm not seeing, so, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So through the mayor, the subdivision servicing standards bylaw is a bit unique compared to most of our other bylaws in which it contains a lot of standard details. So it has standard details for what a road plan and section view would look like. So it's showing where parking bays and street lighting and trees, those likely are going to have to be updated or changed. And the time for engineers to design and produce plan or drawings for us to include in there on top of reviewing standards and specifications. It's quite a detailed and dense bylaw. It's a binder that's this thick instead of 10 pages. So it's just the volume of detail that's in it, and then the fact that there's likely going to be drawings produced out of it that's where kind of the estimate has come from.
Okay, I've got a couple, I'll ask one. About this trail from lower to upper. I just wanted to ask too about how we're communicating it, because I thought we communicated the Helen's Way as a trail that linked lower and upper, and now we're saying this one's the only one that does. So is it just a different part of lower are we talking about, or how do we see the difference here?
So I would say I don't think anybody would characterize it as the only pathway up and down. I think it's the one that's closest to the central business area. Yeah, so certainly they're not taking it at all away from the connection that Helen's Way provides.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want, let's hopefully we can have that clarity then. I am interested more in, especially spending housing funds on it too, of how this would look different from the way it is now. Because I mean, I think there are also some considerations about, do we want that to be really like more used? I think there are some, just because of the grading, it gets worn out pretty easily, I think. And also I know sometimes there are neighbors who have concerns about it being used a lot at night, for example, and the noise. And I just think we should have some consideration of the practicality of it being a lot more used by people for different reasons. So, and we've never talked about it at that council before. I'm not sure any council I've been on has really talked much about this trail. So, I'm interested in having more of a discussion of it. This is the first time I've seen it.
So if I may just provide some clarity on what it is that we envision doing to the trail. The idea is the sections that are above, from the section that's immediately above South Fletcher, so from South Fletcher to Periwinkle Lane, I believe it is, or Persephone Lane, I can never recall which one is which, but from between here and Sergeant Road, the lowest section is in very poor condition. It's a slipping hazard. As a regular user of that trail, it's by far the worst section of trail. As you go further up, there's sections that are paved, then there's some sections that it's just a trail and the grade is far less steep and really doesn't require much other than it could benefit from a resurfacing just with some more fresh gravel, but it doesn't really require. The lower section is to a point where it's been identified as a safety hazard. There's rutting from water running through, and certainly it's an area where we understand there have been some instances where people have slipped, especially if it's wet. So what the concept that we envision would be to rebuild it and find opportunities to build some steps in there, like some landscaping trail kind of grade steps, and just to eliminate the steeper sections of it so it's going to hold up a little bit more robustly over time. We do see it does get a fair bit of use. And then from the bottom of the trail to provide a better connection past the 494, which is the school division building, because there's a trail that connects from South Fletcher to the lane there. So that would be a route for folks to get from Upper Gibsons to the downtown business area without having to kind of go down the steepest section of School Road. And so it would cut that grade. That's the concept of that route. So we would propose another crosswalk to get from the bottom of the up and down trail to that trail connecting to Periwinkle Lane. That's the concept of it. And we certainly would be bringing it to committee for approval of the plans kind of once we have something put together. But it's really the lower section from South Fletcher up that requires the attention to resurface and address just to make it safe for continued use. If continuing to use isn't a priority, then that certainly would change our intentions for that trail.
Okay, is this on the trail, Councilor Kroll?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor White. Something that sort of perked my ears when you said steps and our concern these days with accessibility. So I'm assuming accessibility would be taken into consideration with this?
Through the mayor, it's a 20% slope, so accessibility isn't part of the conversation, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, but the steps, well, I mean, it depends on what we're talking about. I feel like steps can help accessibility in some ways. I mean, we're not talking about a wheelchair, for sure, that kind of accessibility, but to make it, I feel like what we're talking about here is going to make this far more accessible for a lot of people, a lot of the population, not the entire population, not universal, but Councillor Thompson?
Just on the note of accessibility, it was great to see the new grant application opportunity for $500,000. That was fabulous to see. Hope it works out.
Other questions on operating? Do I have another one here? I don't, yeah. Okay, let's move on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the, I'll be referring to the staff report content that starts on page 8 of 22, but in particular to page 19 of 22, which is the 2026 general capital projects list. And then similar to the operating projects, but I think more important with capital projects, having gone through the 26 focus, we'll look at the 5-year because a number of these projects, and some don't even appear until 2027 or later. The capital project list, there is a significant housing project we've discussed, and this is item number 1 on page 19 of 2022. This is the approximate, assuming, project 19 of, page 19 of 22. Headed up at the top, attachment C, 2026 general capital project list. So the first item there is the is half money, and since we're only discussing 2026, it's 100,000 of that 1.3 million. And the idea is, in this particular case, the town has a site that it owns right now. It's decided with council approval to proceed to service it. Wonderful. The first thing that happens when you do that is you have to spend up to 100,000 getting detailed design for all the service components. Depending on where you are, you may need some special permits, but it's all about getting organized to then spend some significant money the following years to actually construct the services. And perhaps I could use this as an example. So just for the overhead, if we go to page 22 of 22, and go to the development services section right up near the top, the first line in that section says the same thing: housing sites, infrastructure, amenities. And you can see, yes, there's the 100,000 for 2026, and then on flows the additional money, 900,000 2027, 314,448 in 2028. You may wonder, why are those amounts, those particular amounts in those years? It's because we're still going through the process of earning the money from the Housing Accelerator Fund. So for sure, there's $100,000 available in 26. Almost certainly there's 900,000 available in 2027. And depending on how things end up, we're quite hopeful that there will be another $314,448 available for 2028. So that's the half money, which still is yet to find its final homes. So back on 19 of 22 and the 2026 list. So this is our big housing capital focus. There is a very big project being wrapped up on O'Shea Road, and the second phase of it included the integration of a large childcare center. So that whole phase 2 with the childcare center was a $14 million cost project, excluding the value of the land that it's on. All of the money that BC has provided to the town of Gibsons has been flowed through to the development team. So we have no more money to collect from BC and no more money to flow over. But the reason there's some yellows there is under the documentation with BC, the town's responsible to see that this project is finished and that it's open this fall, the childcare center in particular. The management of the childcare center is still something that's being worked on. The next two items up there are in connection with accessibility. So yes, there was a regional accessibility plan developed last year. It's in its final stages of adoption with our regional partners. But staff here have already moved on to the implementation part. Yes, we do not have any readily accessible money of our own, but RBC has started a program which has a look and feel to it that they intend this to go on for some years, not just a one-off. And that's connected in with the Rick Hansen Foundation. And Canada has started to support this in a more substantial way. So we have found a program that could work here for $500,000, but we do need to keep our expectations low for now. There's only $10 million available, and each application has to be a minimum of $500,000 100,000. So that's the 10 million for the country, all local governments. But it's a start. And that one is about improving the accessibility of the town buildings and facilities from a workplace employment perspective. So both those are there. In the approval year under 26, adoption of these lists essentially empowers staff to get on and make those applications. Staff are working on them, but they haven't come to council as a standalone report. Just to flag that for you. So moving on to the next header there, resiliency, natural assets, climate action. The town is very close to getting the permits it needs from the province and Canada so that it can move on to the construction part of the foreshore protection. So all the detailed design work and all the consultation with the senior government bodies who need to be consulted with is pretty much concluded. We just have to have the permits back from them, and then there will be about $1.8 million spent. And an ancillary benefit of that work will be the upgrading of the seawalk between Armours Beach and the Harbor Wharf, which is a great secondary benefit to this project. The next item up, number 5, urban forestry tree planting. So essentially, parks and engineering are contributing $20,000 of labor in kind is the way FCM and BC Hydro are looking at it. So Hydro and FCM have received applications. I would say they look pretty good, and they'll fund $40,000. The town will do that match of 20. And that first round of significant tree planting effort, which follows the adoption of the Urban Forestry Plan 2025, will also be coupled in with an asset management system for trees. There's a separate FCM grant for that, but to figure out how to do this really well, essentially get all the data pretty much of the trees that are available, get it into some kind of database, have it identified in there based on the urban forestry report and other things we know where the sites for trees are, sort out what kind of tree to put there or plant there, and then go ahead and do it and look after them well for the first year, and then move on to the next areas. It's that kind of a setup. I'm not familiar with a detailed one before, so maybe we're doing some innovative things here. I mean, in the forestry industry with LiDAR and all these other things, there are some fairly sophisticated renderings of tree stands and what's in there and what its estimated age is and what type it is. I'm just a finance guy, so I'm not sure how detailed our system will be, but I just wanted to flag there's the practical in the ground side, and while they're at it, they'll be sorting out how to have it in a database properly. And then maybe there'll be an AI agent someday that will work with that. Okay. Up next is the town is very is very engaged, involved in the whole environmental resilience, natural assets, border community. So ICLEI Canada is, I understand, running groups of communities together into what they call climate resilient hubs. So in the town's case, and maybe we're one of the first ones, so this is being funded by FCM, $1 million share between the town, Squamish, North Shore Search and Rescue, some other groups. It's pretty broadly afield, but that having been organized, when we step back and say, great, and what share is the town's and what will the town do? For capital purposes, in 2026, there's $156,000 for a collection of small projects. And then in, I think, 27, 28, there is separate money, about $250,000 for basically further investigation and setup of public information and dissemination to do with resilience issues where ICLEI and others have identified a lot of gaps that the traditional emergency planning does not look after. That is item number 6. The next up, Harbor, Waterfront, Economic Development, Visitors, Film, Nonprofit Organizations. This is the community services area. It's doesn't have a well, it's led by the CAO, and a number of senior staff members contribute from time to time depending on what's going on. What's going on a capital side that's significant. Yes, we certainly hope that Persephone is makes it through restoration and is displayed in 2026. But the really big activity that's coming up is to do with Five Corners and construction the end of 2026 and the beginning of 2027, the quietest time of year, albeit the wettest and the coldest. So that's Five Corners, plaza, washrooms, harborfront, including plaza, new access stairs, accessibility, route down the wharf incline, parking management, set up in Upper Gibsons in preparation for transit and shuttle. Overall, that's a $2.5 million project. And the first half of core, or an estimate of how much would be spent in 2026 is on the sheet there for about $1.1 million, $1.15 million. And then connected with it are what came up earlier, number 11, parking lot improvements, Lower Gibsons. So there's $145,000 in a public parking reserve, which can be used on Town of Gibsons owned lots or lots where the town had a formal long-term agreement. It's not a lot of money, but in conjunction with that other $40,000, working with special parking specialists and engineering support, that is intended to be enough to do all the simple projects so that a substantial advance will be made in how everyone can benefit for the parking spaces we do have off-street in Lower Gibsons. And then finally, and it's an item that came forward from, well, it's item number 12, waterfront seawalk lighting gaps. So Dialogue 26 highlighted one section in particular, but I understand there's several sections that would benefit either with lighting or better lighting. There is $73,000 in a reserve that could be used for this purpose. It has to be scoped out exactly what can be done, but my understanding is if you were thinking of like one of those lights down on the seawall that stands up out of the ground, it's more of a decorative lamp, and the electrical to it, assuming that there's electrical service nearby, that kind of activity is about $13,000 each. So it is possible to fix the specific area this person raised, and the communications I've had with staff about it is that there has been a long time waiting for developments, and the notion that, oh, when that finally happens, this will all come into place, shifting to the thinking of the community is like, well, that's great, but we don't want to wait any longer for anywhere where there's no light. So I think all that would mean is more on the developer's side is if you eventually develop and you mess this all up, you're going to have to put it all back. And that'll be on you. But in the meantime, the community won't wait any longer to have light in those sections. So all of this is, we'll see in a moment how there is so much going on in the waterfront in this capital plan, from Armour's Beach basically all the way back to the Marina Public Market area. Next up of note, Parks and Recreation Services. So Pebbles Beach is almost completed, but there's still a very important $30,000 to spend on landscaping. and a little bit of money on amenities at the top there. Here's the up and down trail. So the scoped proposal is this notion that there is up to 3 sections that need significant work. They would be done one by one. They would on average cost about $75,000 to do whatever is done. And so the first year is listed here. And I should note, because it's one thing to do with half that I had queried, as long as the town can draw a connection between what they're spending half money on and how it supports housing or densification, it can be quite far apart and not a direct item. That is something that CMHC wants to hear about these proposals, but they will generally approve. So I think stepping back here, the first step in thinking this through is staff coming up with proposals and council considering what those are. And the purpose on this list is, to the extent that the committee accepts what's on this list, are items that staff will then at some point discuss with the CMHC person assigned to this file. Yeah. The one thing CMHC, at about half, is really stringent on is you promise so many units, you promise so many of these kinds of units. If you deliver, then you are now free to have this money, but please tell us what you're doing it, because they don't want us spending it on things that can't be somehow connected to housing. Item 16, it's not enough, but that's the annual Parks Capital Maintenance Program that was started last year. This is the one where the head of the function is responsible for sorting out the wisest way of spending that $50,000, and in time, hopefully, that will be, $100,000. Down under transportation services, there are some key things to note here. So, first of all, the town does not have a roads or sidewalks rehabilitation program or budget. So in this report, it's flagged that, okay, when the condition assessments come in on the roads, for example, that will be the time to follow on with what the program looks like, and that will be a time to sort out how to fund it. And funding doesn't necessarily have to automatically mean, raising more money for reserve. It might be looking out ahead at some of the existing general fund debt, which requires cash flow to make the payments and eventually will mature. And it might be, well, let's make a plan that when some of these debts come to maturity, that if we have some large gap on sidewalks or roads or whatever, let that money that's already been, it's in the tax base, let that money go over here and fix this gap. It doesn't always have to be raise more money. It can be use existing money when you have the opportunity. But for now, there's nothing there. Notionally last year, the gas tax, the Canada Community Building Fund Communities Work Fund money of approximately $300,000 was started to be aligned with roads and sidewalks so that there would be some funding. But as part of being able to get the senior government grants that are needed for the investments at Five Corners, Council approved that the gas tax money is dedicated to that project at least until 2028. And then that money will be available again. And that is the amount of time it's going to take to sort out roads and sidewalks anyway. Skyline Road paving, the general fund share is there. That's item number 18, and that will be spent this year. Item number 19 is worth flagging. So we have an active transportation plan, and the senior governments are still providing operating funds for local governments to go out and make active transportation plans. But at this point, BC had a very good program through Ministry of Transportation and Transit, which they said in 2025, sorry, we have to pause it. We'll think about this. It may return, it may not. But that was an excellent tool. It was a a 50% share of the funding up to a maximum, which, forgive me, I think it was 500,000 when they ended up the program. So that hurt the town because not this particular Gower Point area project. The town had one selected and it had its share of the money and things were in good shape to just get on and do it. Now Canada has some funding, but the grant application that went in March 25 has no response. So I don't know what will happen with that. It's certainly not encouraging. So I just wanted to flag that right now the town itself can't fund the implementation of these. And I guess for advocacy, although there are a lot of other needs, encouragement at UBCM and FCM is that senior government shouldn't abandon what so much effort in the last 5 to 10 years has gone into building up. And then finally, the 26 list finishes off with items 20 and 21, which are our current, well, for buildings, 100,000 is the current allowance for capital maintenance works. Staff are combining that with regular repairs and maintenance work for each of those properties and actually managing to do a lot of really good things. The reason why the equipment expenditure is so high in 2026 is because there's a very expensive piece of equipment, the Vactor, the suction pump machine, has to be replaced. It's one that's core. It's a core asset that you have to have because when you need it now. It's when for things go wrong with drainage and sewer and those kinds of things. It doesn't lend itself to contracting out very well. But otherwise, that fleet replacement is more on average 150,000 a year, and that's the current funding is handling that well. If council, if the committee would have a look at page 22 of 22, we are coming to the end of the presentation on capital assets or projects, and this one is just a quick summary. So now we're looking at a 5-year picture, and you may have noted that in both the operating 5-year picture and the capital 5-year picture, if you're interested in specifically how things ended with Plan 25 projects and what was spent, that's on those sheets. Now, on the main takeaways I see on this sheet are, one, all of those green items, that's all the waterfront, 5 corners, beach-connected projects. And you can see there's a lot of them. And then out in the areas with the figures, there are yellow amounts. So I just want to comment on those fairly quickly. I mean, the yellow is first, you need to be finished spending the money. That's what the funders want. The light item, housing sites infrastructure, the first yellow, that's $1.3 million in that line. The child care center construction in partnership with the Sunshine Coast Housing Society is the second line, and there's the $14 million to wrap up that project by 2027. We've commented on the foreshore protection, the next yellow one, $1.8 million. Going down towards the middle with the washrooms, the stairs, Upper Gibsons parking and so on, there's the total $2.5 million project over 26-27. The smaller connected projects that have been discussed underneath that. Now down under Parks and Recreation Services is the Armours Beach Project Phase 2 that is now the biggest scope of Phase 2 that anyone had pictured. It's in there for $1 million in 2027 and $6 million in 2028. That's the last of the significant ones there. We'll come back to that one in a moment. Down at the bottom in 2025, the plans were to invest $3.6 million. We managed to invest 2.1. The project capacity and infrastructure is now established. There were a lot of empty seats there in 2025. And while that number might seem low, 2.1 versus 3.6, I think it's a reflection of how much people were able to do with what they had in terms of personnel. And now in 26, they're in the position to actually look after investing $5.6 million. So that's encouraging. As far as how it rolls out, well, there are projects well delineated for 26 and potentially for 27, 28. And then it's, at least in the general municipal fund, it's much more open. Over in the utilities funds, there's lots of activity out in the later years. So this should mix together pretty well. And and if we could turn to page 21 of 22. So we've just gone from a sheet that lists all these projects and how much they cost. This sheet is essentially a listing of all of the sources of revenue for those projects, page 21 of 22. And I'll just pick out the highlights on it. So in the second column, there's three little items, and they're about senior grant decisions or decisions by people on large amounts of money that are really important. So up near the top, Q2 2026, the town is eagerly anticipating a positive response from BC Rural Economic Development and Infrastructure Program. That would be BC's share of that project, $1 million. We'll see how that unfolds, and we may have to make adjustments to our plans. Down in the middle in contributions, we anticipate hearing an indication anyway of whether Swim Drink Fish, the Canadian donor-backed nonprofit organization, would like to work with the town on the Armours Beach project. I mean, there'd be lots more discussions afterwards, but we just need to know whether they wish to or not. And then down at the very bottom, also Armours Beach. So Swim Drink Fish says, oh, we'd like to work with you, get through the interview process. Now staff have to come back to council because it's a much more real concept and discuss the merits of the project, and in particular, how does staff propose to engage with the community to see if there's an overall positive response out there for it. And that ideally concludes middle of the year in the summer, so that the resolution that if it's to the extent there will be debt funding, an alternative approval process would immediately follow all this public engagement while it's fresh in people's mind what this is all about. And actually, while they're there, pointing out how it would be prospectively paid for, so they're aware of that. Then you could do some notices in the summer before we get into the election cycle, where the activities we can actively pursue out there are minimized. We could find out what the public felt, and under an alternative approval process, it's about if a large enough part of the community says this is a horrible idea, I come in and I say no, or not. I mean, if the community at large is satisfied that this is something they wish to support, then not many people respond. And we don't know what the answer would be. We're not even sure council's going to send us out for sure on public engagement, and we don't know whether Swim Drink Fish is going to be our partner or not. So staff will advise you as soon as we know more. Yeah, there's nothing else on that sheet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For questions, I've got one note. I'll go to, I guess, yeah, I'll start then. Just I appreciate the explanation about the CMHC and the Housing Accelerator Fund. I am a bit uncomfortable still about spending it on like a parks project and I mean, we haven't kind of brainstormed about, we haven't had a chance, I don't think there was a council to kind of talk about housing in a dialogue or a workshop or anything about where this funding could be spent. I mean, I appreciate too that you mentioned some other possibilities about property or supporting town property. But I guess on this one, I see like, and it's plotted out as 75, 75, 75 over the years. I mean, would the Housing Accelerator Fund, and it does, I also recognize it needs to be spent by a certain time too. So would it fund the first 75 and then, or the whole thing over the years?
Mayor White, it's right now in the project list as 75,000 per year.
Yeah.
From the half money, so it would be 225,000 off just over 1.5 million, which is why we have a figure for 1.3 just left as housing connected. So it would be it is an amenity that would qualify. It is a smaller piece of that money, and that's as far as staff considered it.
And are there were there other options that staff considered about funding this, like including if CMHC were to say no to this expense?
Our understanding is CMHC would say yes to this. As far as discussing other areas, a range of items were. Armour's Beach was discussed. And it was shot down, as in that's a great project, but it's on the want side of things rather than the needs. So, yeah, I don't think there's been an extensive conversation on the staff side, but I think it's because there aren't a lot of things that are glaringly unsolved. So the up and down trail made its way into the 2025 financial plan for 50,000, and it was unclear how much that would cover, but it was to get going on the one of these lower sections that needs attention. And as far as staff got before their capacity infrastructure was too low and other projects were a bigger priority, a substantial work plan, including design, had mostly been done. And the hope was to go ahead and implement that in 26.
Councillor D'Andretti.
Thank you, Mayor. Just because I don't understand, with regard to the tree planting, it says here on page 9 that is $60,000 for tree planting work beginning 2025. But when I look on page 22, I see only $40,000.
Through the mayor, Councilor D'Andretti, the 20,000 difference is the staff time that Parks and Engineering will put in to that project. So BC Hydro provides 10,000 cash, SCM provides 30,000 in cash, and then FCM expects 20,000 in kind or cash from us, and they have accepted that the town staff time on planting those trees and looking after them would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councillor D'Andretti.
Thank you. This regards the Five Corners. So we do have, we have 1 million pending. The total work is 2.5. So what happens if we don't get the 1 million funding?
There has been a discussion with council around the time that the REDIP application was being prepared, and we believe we have a backstop solution, but it comes at the cost of doing other things. And one of the things that REDIP asks is, oh, do you have other money you could use instead of our money? And we push back in our application, well, no, we don't. It's like, sure, the town has other monies, but we have other priorities. And that money's spoken for elsewhere. So we didn't have any money to volunteer as sharing. But the range of outcomes on the REDIP grant could be their funding pool for their awards in 2020, spring 2026 was severely cut back in 2025. However, the program manager there says that there will still be some $1 million awards in BC. We feel we made a really good application, and we were careful to write the application so that if they wished to look at it as two pieces that go together, if they weren't going to do $1 million for the town of Gibsons, perhaps they could do $500,000 or more. So that's another option, maybe a higher probability option. And then the other option, again, is that they won't fund any of the project. But there is planning in place to make sure that that project can go ahead.
Councillor Thompson.
I just have a comment, and that's, I'm in awe of, like, with the grants, there's so much speculation, but yet you've all been so strategic in the planning, and I just have to commend you because it's, looking at this with all of the question marks, and yet we still have such a solid strategic plan in place. It's highly impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, will that be yeah, is that kind of a
that said, I'll-
precursor to a motion,
Exactly, thank you. Yeah.
Director?
Mayor White, if I may, just so the committee is aware, I mean, the committee is recommending Liz Ford, and staff will take this and put it into a draft operating plan for 2026, and then the financial plan 2026, 2030. That's going to go through to the middle, later March. So on items like up and down trail and so on, that council may want to reflect more on this, or as you said, maybe half needs a workshop, or there's time to do that and there's time to change things. It's just providing finance a pretty safe set of material to incorporate into the next round of activity. Thank you.
Councillor Kroll?
Just for clarification, was that Councillor Thompson moving the recommendation on page 13?
Well, we're starting to, yeah.
That,
Yeah.
So if Councillor Thompson is making the recommendation, I will second it.
Okay.
If she's not making the recommendation, I'll make the recommendation.
Yes, I am, A through D
Okay,
attachments.
I will second it.
okay, yeah, any further discussion? Yeah, I mean, I definitely support most of it. I do have concerns about how we're spending the half funding, so that's maybe something that we will continue to look at. All those in favor? The motion carries. And we're on to, is there anything else maybe on the budget process, or, yeah, Councillor Kroll?
It's sort of directly, indirectly the budget. Not all communities received Housing Accelerator funding. And we're incredibly grateful for having received this funding. But I've also noticed that some of our housing projects in the community haven't received the support from CMHC. And I'm wondering if there's a bit of a disconnect because we received this funding, that these projects are not getting the funding. And I just find it a little disconcerting.
I think there's a disconnect, but it's not that disconnect. I've been in touch with CMHC and in touch with the MP. about this. And I mean, I will say to their credit that the CMHC representative I talked to was just right on it and said, I'm going to send an email right now. This is concerning. I mean, but like, yeah, I mean, theoretically, if they're supporting us to do the Housing Accelerator Fund, they're kind of implies that they've got an end to hold up to actually support the projects that are dependent on their support. And that unfortunately, as we all know, there's government silos, and even within GMHC there is. And I think that probably the main explanation for it is, yeah, in the government silos too, there's this new Canada Builds initiative from the new Prime Minister, which they've had to throw a lot of money into, and they've taken some money from CMHC programs to go into this other program that's outside of CMHC. So I think there's still some hope that some of these projects or some of these programs that have run out of money, or they're now more competitive because they have less money, the applications to them can be redirected. And that was good news I learned on the call with CMHC too, is that initially that program, the Canada Builds program, was completely focused on larger communities. And it was, I mean, I remember it being announced at Housing Central, and it was really, really disappointing to all the smaller communities, because we basically can't qualify unless we group together and to larger populations. But they heard, I mean, that was some advocacy, good provincial, federal advocacy through UBCM, FCM. They did hear, and they shifted the program so that now 30% of it is available to small communities. So that's my long answer to that. A lot of work's being done in trying to troubleshoot and perhaps, you know, yeah, maybe some of these projects that have been denied can be redirected to other sources of funding that might work well for them. But work's ongoing in that. I forget if I had something else on that I was going to mention or ask too. I don't think so. Yeah. So next meeting of Committee of the Whole is March 3rd, 2026 at 1 p.m. And of course, we have a council meeting today at 3:30 in half an hour. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Crowell, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Motion carries. What's that?
I have the same notes about the same
Yeah.